Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Within Warzone right now, we've actually seen a bit of a shakeup when it comes to the general perk selection. We finally have some of the new perks in the game, some ones that have been added through events actually working for once now. And today, that said, I wanted to go through and break down each individual perk category and talk about the main takeaways, which perks you want to pay attention to for your certain style of gameplay, right? So going through, obviously, every single custom loadout is going to have 3 perks. You can go a lot of different routes depending on if you are a super aggressive player, maybe a bit more of a relaxed player, a bit more casual, whatever the case is, right? So in perk 1, you got a lot to choose from, right? Just outright. There are a couple that, at least for me, are a bit bugged, and by couple I mean scavenger. I'm level 233 and it says I can't unlock it because I haven't reached level 26 yet. Luckily, scavenger's not a main takeaway one. As of the time that I'm recording this, low profile is still a couple of weeks out from being available. This is going to be unlocked through the Clover Craze event, but even then, this is one that's not going to be like a mainstay. You're going to notice throughout this video, a lot of these perks are convenient with their little niche upgrades, but ultimately they're best felt as a bonus impact on Specialist. Truly, the end-all be-all goal in every single game for you should probably be to get Specialist bonus, because then you get every single perk in the game and you start to notice, okay, this is really nice because I have Specialist. I wouldn't be taking this nice little benefit though over something that's probably a bit more utilized in general gameplay. But low profile, allowing you to have better movement when you're crouched or prone, or when you crawl across the ground as a knock. That is a really defensive perk and probably not one that's going to get much use outside of, again, if you have Specialists. So not one that I think is really worth running. Veteran, as of late, has become a much more popular perk because it reduces the negative effects of certain enemy equipment, and also you have less flinch when you're holding down your sights, so that's always a nice benefit. But you're immune to grenadiers, snapshots. You're also more resistant to flash, gas, movement, and shock negative effects. There is a massive gas grenade spam going on. Shock sticks as well have really risen in popularity and usage lately. So this is one that if you feel like you are constantly being overwhelmed by those effects, it might be worth to have a loadout with this on there, right? This does actually have a use based on the way that the equipment meta has evolved over the course of the first couple of seasons here in BO6 Warzone. Reflexes is all right. Again, this is one that I think is probably more beneficial just as a straight up benefit to Specialist bonus. It has that delay when you run past explosives. So Betties and mines and hazard grenades and whatever else, they are seriously spammed as well. Like, especially as of late, I don't know what changed, but it feels like every time I run into a building that I know a team is in, I'm getting hit by a blast mine or a hazard mine or something, right? So reflexes is super convenient for that. I don't necessarily think it's the most valuable perk in this category, which is good because now I'm having to, you know, pick and choose based on competitiveness, right? It's not a, hey, this is the #1 overall crutch perk, everyone's using this, no brainer, right? It's good to have this parity, but this is one that is certainly useful. Again, though, is more reliant on what your enemies are doing for it to take effect. So it's not something that you're necessarily in control of. It's entirely enemy dependent, and that to me does knock it down a tier. But as a Specialist bonus, it's really good as well. Grenadier, not nearly as useful here. Explosive damage slows enemy health regen and movement speed, so that's okay. You're in control of that. You can also throw equipment further, but that's just equipment based. You have to be running explosives then. You might be wanting to use something like a knife instead for the insta finishes, or you might not have nades. You might have used your 2, and then this perk is completely useless. So again, a Specialist bonus upgrade there, but nothing more than that. Mountaineer, let's talk about this one. This is the main reason I was making this video, because I've been waiting on Mountaineer to be fixed, because for the first 4.5 weeks of it being out, it didn't work. It was completely busted. It wouldn't even go on your loadout. It would work under Specialist, but that was it. And obviously, if you die once, you lose Specialist. Now, Mountaineer, take less fall damage. They made the shift to Mountaineer when they updated Dexterity and moved that over to be a general, global, universal perk for everyone, but they took away the fall damage benefits of that. And now, with Mountaineer, pretty straightforward. You take less fall damage. However, after a bunch of testing has been done by various different creators, Mountaineer pretty underwhelming this year, which is incredibly frustrating for me, someone who has been known to maybe be prone to fall damage here and there, all right? With this, you get about 6 extra meters of protection before damage becomes lethal, right? It's not a huge upgrade. you compare this to previous iterations of fall damage negating perks, even as recent as MW3, Mountaineer, or the equivalent of it, it was way more noticeable in games beforehand. Now, you do absolutely get a larger safety net for fall damage, but it's not that significant. And for that reason, it really knocks down the, I think, the advantages of running Mountaineer in this game. I've been using it for a couple of games, testing out to see if it's truly more worth using than Survivor, in my opinion. And it's hard to count how many times that extra few meters fully saved me there, right? So this, unfortunately, I feel like is in need of a decent buff to make it more similar to what we had last year. Scavenger, as I alluded to before, not really that great, just because getting extra ammo, you do that when you get kills. There are ammo caches all across the map. This is just not one that's going to be super convenient. And then Survivor, lastly here, I think is probably the best perk in perk 1, although there's certainly more competitive options now between Mountaineer, Veteran, things of that nature, right? With Survivor, though, being able to start regenning faster in this game is insanely important. Being able to regen just after 3 seconds instead of like 5 or 6, I think it is by default, could be the difference of a life or death situation. You also revive allies faster when you're down, so that's a nice little benefit as well. This is, yes, a bit more of a defensive perk, which I'm not always a huge fan of. It relies on you taking damage, but let's be realistic. In most fights, you're gonna be taking damage, and being able to heal quicker or start regenning quicker than enemies in any situation is immediately gonna give you the upper hand in the continuation of that gunfight, or as the next enemy's approaching, the third party, or whatever the case is, right? So this one, incredibly advantageous. And by the way, as we are breaking down all the perks here today, quick reminder, if you are new to the channel, or maybe you have not subscribed yet, we should change that. Every single day, I got you covered with news, updates, patch notes, meta breakdowns. It's all right here. So feel free to hit that subscribe button and turn on those post notifications. And if you enjoy this video, you find the info helpful, a like rating is always seriously appreciated as well. Now, perk 2 also has a couple of new additions since we last talked about perks in this game. We've also seen updates to several of them as well. First up, reactive armor. You might have noticed that this was actually available in Warzone before it became fully unlockable through the event, right? Because those who got specialist at the very start of season 2, or whenever this was added in, ended up getting the bonuses of it right away. And with it, it was regenning armor super quick. The description of this, your armor regenerates to 50% of its max if you have not taken damage in the last 5 seconds. So a reactive perk, essentially. If you're not taking damage, you can start healing your armor. Now, for one, if you are constantly stacking up on armor plates, this doesn't have as much of a purpose outside of the fact that you don't have to do the animation necessarily. But unfortunately, when they released this perk publicly through the event, they nerfed the regen. Before, it was actually pretty speedy, it was pretty quick, and now it definitely is not that fast. It's kind of slow, all things considered. So this, unfortunately, while it sounds great on paper, in execution is also a little bit underwhelming, similar to Mountaineer. It's a bummer that these new perks that they're adding in aren't really living up to the hype, because perks, in my opinion, should be strong. They should be advantages to your class setup and not, you know, underwhelming in certain cases, right? So unfortunately, reactive armor, while it could be really good, and it was before it was fully released, unfortunately now is a bit underwhelming. So that's one that I don't really think is too important. Again, just a nice benefit to have on specialist. Quartermaster, recharge your equipment over time. Also very useful, especially if you are not a player who is actively running around constantly looting bodies. If you're fighting at longer distances, you don't have time to go over, check the bodies of the squad you just took out, or it's not an option to at that point in the game. This is incredibly beneficial. Getting more nades to throw, getting more smokes, or whatever the case is, this is huge. This really, I would say, is probably a perk that's best getting picked up later in the game. Setting yourself up for end game with this is a lot more advantageous than starting with it, just because up close, you know, initially you're gonna be fighting players probably at closer distances. It'll be safer to go and loot them and get more equipment and pick that stuff up instead. But this does certainly have its benefits for sure. This is one of the better perk 2 perks in my opinion. Bomb Squad reduces incoming explosive and fire damage. You can also see enemy equipment through walls. One of the strongest perks in the game. I personally don't run this as much because I'm more movement based in my play style, but this is one that I love getting specialist for because it truly makes my life so much easier. As I mentioned earlier, there is a huge meta and a huge spam going on of mines and hazard stuff. And when you walk into buildings, if you're delaying them, that's even better. You know, this is nice to pair in perk 1 if you can delay things with reflexes, especially if you're worried about explosives. But just in general, having that negated damage and taking less damage from those explosives is huge. And also being able to see them, because if your teammates aren't running this, you can then relay that info. Hey, there's 2 mines around the corner here, make sure we don't push that, or make sure we trigger it and then back off. You know, this gives you so much information for pushing, but it then also helps out a ton with your overall health and can honestly save your life a ton. So bomb squad is one I'd absolutely recommend using if you're not too worried about general movement. Unfortunately, again, because they haven't fixed these perks, tracker for me still busted, because I guess I haven't reached level 29 yet, but being able to see enemy footsteps is solid for sure. This is one that I liked as a benefit of specialist, but it's not one that I think is more valuable than something like quartermaster, bomb squad, or as we get to here, a couple of other options, like for instance, sprinter. Infinite tack sprint. The fastest possible movement mechanic in the game is tack sprint, and having that indefinitely is fantastic. You are going to be able to rotate as fast as possible. You are going to have the tack sprint of fire and the tack ADS speeds associated with you at all times, but this is also the best way to break cameras up close, being able to escape gunfights, or get around corners quicker, to reset your health, to push and bridge the gap between you and an enemy team. This has so many advantages. Whether you are playing defensively or offensively, it's one of the better options here. Personally, I'd still love to see this replaced by slipstream, so there's no tack sprint and instead it's just much smoother with omni movement, but for now, sprinter is one of the mainstays on all of my loadouts. Definitely a fantastic choice. Cold-blooded, being undetectable by AI targeting, and then also thermals. Also, you're immune to tracker marks and the footprints there, and scrambling, pretty solid there. Again, a bit more defensive. It's only useful if your enemies are doing those things, if they're using AI streaks, if they're using trackers. So a little bit too niche to want to have as a mainstay on your loadout, in my opinion. Again, nice benefit of specialist. Also still busted for me. I got to hit level 41 first, guys. Lastly here, quick fix. Again, a very, very strong option here. Whenever you get a kill, at least when it's functioning as intended, this one's got a lot of bugs. It sometimes works and it sometimes doesn't. Kind of depends on the update. But with this, when you get a kill or you start plating up, you start your health regen. So this and survivor together, I feel like might be a little bit overdone, a little bit too much, just because if you're actively healing up in a gunfight and you start, putting plates in and you start that regen immediately, well, then the effects of survivor aren't going to be as good. It's kind of like a one or the other here. Survivor obviously is regenning after 3 seconds. If you're getting damage, it's not always going to pop there, but this being manually forced is like a different approach to it. Health regen also triggers on gun, melee, and throwing knife kills just across the board. So this can be very good. I don't know if I'd always pair it with survivor. If you're someone who really wants that delayed explosives, or you want the increased fall damage, then quick fix certainly can have a nice spot there from the healing standpoint, which is always very important in a gunfight. But for me, I think the benefits of survivor pairing then with sprinter ultimately are going to be a better option here. But there's certainly different ways you can build it out depending on what you think you value more, what is more important to your style of gameplay, which again, objectively is a good thing to have that parity. And then lastly, in perk 3, this is probably the most competitive perk category because everything here is strong, right? I personally love Gung Ho, mainly because I can reload while tack sprinting, but this is the most beneficial when you're pairing it with sprinter because I'm always tack sprinting. I have that indefinitely, so there's really no point in time where I'm moving that I can't reload. Without this, it can be kind of clunky, and if you use auto tack sprinter, if you're trying to do that in situations a lot, it's gonna block you from reloading, so that is a big hindrance to gameplay. This paired with sprinter is a huge movement benefit and can help out a ton. This also reduces movement penalties when you are reloading or using equipment, so it's just less noisy there. Essentially, it's not a huge difference there, but still nice to have nonetheless. But mainly for the tack sprint reload is why I go for this. That's just such a crutch for my gameplay personally, and in general I think that's very strong when paired with other perks. That's not to say though that I don't wish I could use some of these other ones too, because resolute, taking damage from gunfire, gives you a little bit of a movement boost. You can start breaking Ankies a little bit better when this pops. It's a 15% movement speed bonus. It does, however, require you to start being shot at. It requires you to be taking hits, which is unfortunate. So it's a really niche situation where this is going to give you an advantage. Where it does give you an advantage, it's very solid. That's why specialist is so good though, of course. Ghost, staying off the radar, obviously very important. If you care about stealth in this game, you play the game a little bit slower, you constantly spam suppressors, this is only going to heighten your experience there. If the UAV spam is going crazy, always important too. So this always is a good option. It's just obviously more dependent on how much you care about showing on the radar. If you're not using suppressors because you value a compensator more, or you're not even using a muzzle, not as useful to use this perk, because anytime you fire anyways, you're gonna show up there. So you really have to build this around your specific weapon loadouts and your weapon builds there. Bird's Eye, really good. I don't think it's as valuable as it was in previous iterations of Warzone, but it's still very strong. UAVs you call in show a larger area. You also get the direct heading of your enemies, so you know which way they're looking, which way they're going to be running there. The elevation arrows are also there on like this advanced UAV style there. So this is, in my opinion, incredibly useful, but only when you're spending the money to pop the UAVs. So you have to spend money to make this perk really good. It's not just a universally always there for you thing like tac sprint reload would be, or you know, staying off the radar would be. So a bit more niche is the reason that it's going to be knocked down some. Again though, for specialists, fantastic bonus. With tempered here, I love this. In general, you only have to refill 2 plates. Your max health is with 2 plates instead of 3, so you spend less time plating up. It's just way more convenient there. You can get right back into the fight. This is something that I think a lot of people have as a mainstay on their loadout, and rightfully so. It's just a matter of, do you value plating up less or having to stop to reload more, or do you value staying off the radar more? You have to weigh the pros and cons here for your style of play. Are you worried that you're going to get caught up in a fight and not have enough time to plate up fully? Well, then tempered's going to save your life, right? So this is so strong, and one that I'd absolutely recommend given your play style and if that's something that you really value. And then lastly, alertness. The only reason I can't fully recommend this is just because it doesn't seem like it's fully working all the time. It senses when enemies are nearby, and you'll get that pop-up enemy nearby on the bottom of your screen. That's great. You'll know that someone's in the building or around the corner from where you're at. It's also supposed to tell you when you're being aimed at by an enemy, and that doesn't seem to work like high alert does, at least consistently or in a super noticeable way. So that's something I think needs to be worked on and maybe made a bit more obvious, and then this would be a much stronger perk and, you know, make even more competition within this category and have even more parity. But for now, it just seems like its inconsistency, or how it's sometimes bugged, really knocks it down a tier. But regardless, there are so many different routes you could go with perks right now. Mountaineer, Survivor, Reflexes, Veteran, Quartermaster, Bomb Squad, Sprinter, Quick Fix, Gung Ho, Ghost, Bird's Eye, Tempered. So many choices depending on your playstyle. Those are the main ones I'd recommend. As I said though, ultimately, if you can just get Specialist, either save up for it, get the polyatomic card on Rebirth and whatnot, get it for free. It is so incredibly strong, especially with how many good little benefits there are here and there, whether they're niche or larger. That's the end all be all. That's the end game goal. But even before that, you can really set yourself up nicely if you play into your setups and into your general play style by adjusting some of your perks here. But that said, that's going to wrap things up. If you enjoyed this video, a like rating would be seriously appreciated. And if you're new to the channel, you want to guarantee that every single day you are in the know for everything going on in COD, feel free to hit that subscribe button and turn on those post notifications. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you later. Peace out.